may be issues or conflicts about financial institutions providing education, but what about, and picking up on what was said earlier, what about the role of firms, basically the role of employers when it comes to providing financial education in the workplace? Interesting survey produced by Second Sight a few months ago said that 67% of the UK working population had received no financial education or advice about managing their finances from their employers. And the figure was even higher for older employers, 77% of those aged over 55 claiming that they'd never received any financial training. Sharon, do you think there is a real role for employers generally to provide financial education?
I'm just going to skip back, if I might, Chair, and just pick up the point that Sue was making, and just on that last discussion that we're having. I think what we're talking about is, yes, financial capability is important for individuals, but you have to have an environment in which those individuals are able to operate with confidence and trust financial services. And so I think it's both of those things really, and it just echoes what we were talking about earlier. We do need to have people who are more financially capable, but actually it doesn't matter how financially capable you are. If the market doesn't work well, then that the outcome is never going to be good. So just to make that point really, the environment's really important, and the financial capability aspect of it, they are complementary things. They're not separate things. They have to happen together in order to get better outcomes for people. But sorry, just getting onto the workplace, I think we have yet to see it play out, to be honest. I have shared some of Sue's concerns about putting responsibilities on employers that they may, a bit like schools, may not be terribly well equipped to deliver. They already have lots of things to do. They have the costs of automatic enrolment, which we haven't seen automatic enrolment roll out fully yet. We've got auto-escalation to come in 2018-19. So we're already asking quite a lot of employers, I think. Yeah. And particularly, let's not forget, there's a lot of small employers. And they've got a lot to deal with. And I don't think anybody's asked employers really what they think about it. And I'm not sure, as an employee, I'm not sure whether I would go to something. I've been to, think about my pension at the Open University, but if somebody said to me, there's some training about saving or managing your money at lunchtime, I probably wouldn't go. And so I think we need to think, what do employees want? And what would actually, what would serve their needs? I think we haven't. It's very easy to think about and talk about rolling these things out without asking the question, well, what do people want? And what do employers, perhaps, what do they feel able to provide? And certainly, I think it's an area of increasing interest. So the Financial Inclusion Commission, for example, has talked about having workplace savings schemes running alongside automatic enrolment into pensions. And I think some of those kind of nudge type activities might work well, but the idea of delivering courses in the workplace, I don't know what the experience has been of those. Hugh might have some experience from Citizens Advice, but I think we need to be really careful about suggesting things without actually testing out whether that's what people want.
Hugh, what have you seen there?
We've not really seen anything, to be honest, within the workplace setting, and I think Sharon's point about asking employees where they would like to go, who they would trust, what they would find useful is absolutely right, as well as asking employers, do they feel able to offer financial capability training to their workforce is again really important. I think, like most things, that this could work for some. It could work for some employers, certainly some larger employers who've got the capacity and the money to be able to fund some of this. And it could work for some employees who may well be engaged by a lunchtime seminar or a bit of coaching after work, etc. But it's certainly not a silver bullet. We would suggest that there are community settings as well that you could usefully deliver financial capability training from. So church and faith groups, children's centres, GP surgeries, etc. These are good forums that, again, people have trust in those who run these services. They might not be the same people who actually deliver the financial capability training, but there is something of a captive audience in some of these settings. So I'd suggest that the workplace and employers should be seen alongside that as serving a specific group for those who do want to engage in that way. But again, it's not a panacea.
Peter?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a good point. I mean, I think the idea of, asking people running fairly small and micro businesses across the country, the person running the local cafe or the local local bookshop or something to be running financial education courses for their employees is just, I think it's a big ask, and I think it would be a big challenge to make that happen, and perhaps a step too far. I think what I would say, though, I think auto enrolment gives us something of a way into that, because whether whichever way, there are likely the fact of the matter is that 10 million people, employees, are going to have some kind of touch point through their employer with a financial product, i.e. a pension. So I think there is something there. But I think perhaps the emphasis falls on the provider to offer some kind of, basic level financial education or some kind of financial understanding through the way auto enrolment is delivered in the workplace. And I think the employer could engage at that level. Whether that then means you ask the employer to run courses at lunchtimes and at the after hours, I'm not sure. I think that's probably a step too far. But as I say, through the as a provider ourselves of auto enrolment, I think we do think there is an opportunity there to be able, as people are logging in to see how their pension is providing in the workplace, that you could offer some facilities around that where people could engage and learn a bit more if they want to. But I think perhaps we'd have more success at that level.
Yeah, I think
using auto enrolment as the basis.
Yeah, I think we've got to disentangle the employer being the educator and the employer being the one who provides access to education, or just points someone in the direction. You can go over there to that website and do that course, and maybe if they want to incentivise their staff to do it, then you can say, well, okay, if you do that course, if you do managing my money, managing my investments, or managing my financial journey, you get to the end, you get a certificate which you've got to pay a small amount for. Exactly. The employer may say, well, if you do that, I'll pay for your certificate.
I think what I'd like to see is employers say, well, look, auto enrolment is not they can see it either as a burden, as something we have to do, and we just get on with it and then move on, or perhaps embrace it and say, okay, well, it's that, but also actually there's an opportunity here for my employees to perhaps sort of offer them some added value as well. But I think, as you say, how much of the balance, how much of the burden rests on the employer, and how much is on the provider, I think I'd say more on the provider.
Right.
So on the question of the role of the employer, there's a spectrum of things they can do. I absolutely agree. They can provide access to specific product. Savings is an obvious one. Actually, possibly household contents insurance and basic. I mean, I think also something which could be, distributed through employers. On the question of education, I do think signposting is a very interesting idea. Signposting to this and other things, and the idea of certificate. On the question though of whether they could provide it, I don't know. It's easy for us to say it wouldn't work, but it would be good if one or two carried out pilots. Yeah. And you might find it differs as between different employers. White collar, blue collar. You might find there are some employee cohort, so to speak, which are more receptive than others. So I do think if it's never been piloted, perhaps you'll tell me it has. If it's never been piloted, I think it would be helpful if someone did.
Okay. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has. I mean, if you go back to the old FSA, financial capability strategy, for those of us who can remember back that far, they did have a workplace stream, and they did actually pilot this in the workplace. I mean, I think we're at huge risk of reinventing things we did 10 years ago.
Okay, well, if that is the case, but did employers actually pilot it?
Yes, they did. They did do it, and I think part of the reason that these things didn't work, part of the reason the government's decided to dispense with the money advice service, is because nobody is talking to people about what they want. There's no good giving, there's no good kind of sheep dipping people into financial education. Finance is dull, boring, scary.
Yeah. Well,
it's all of those things.
The sceptic in me would just want to know what was done and whether it could be done differently. That's all I'm really saying. If it's really been done, fine. But there's something that
doesn't mean to say it shouldn't be done again.
No, or looked at in a different way, or combined with these third-party tools.
Yes.
So I'm not completely convinced that because the FSA did something we should not think again. But
no, I'm not.
But I'm just talking about piloting. I'm somebody just trying it out again and seeing it. Trying out in the 21st century rather than the 20th century.
I think we should learn. I mean, the problem is that policymakers don't learn from things that were done in the past. They just reinvent the wheel and do it in the same kind of way. And it's kind of, we're into Einstein's definition of insanity at that point, which is, you know, keep doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome, and you don't get a different outcome. So it is worth looking at again, but it's so vital. And again, if you go back to the Torreston review, there was extensive work done on what people actually wanted, and what they really wanted was just to pick up the phone and ask some simple questions, and kind of that never quite happened in the way that would have been helpful for reasons that are beyond me. But again, we should be be trying that. You know, they just wanted a jargon buster.
And just to pick up on that, I think there are some employers doing work in this area, and the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development actually, I hope I've got that, CIPD, I hope I've got their name right, have recently commissioned some, or they have been looking to do some work in this area to find out actually what employers are doing and what the scope is, because it has come up on the agenda. Employers get mentioned much more often now. But the jargon busting thing, I have to say, if there was one thing the industry could do and the regulator could help with, it is around the language, because I don't think anybody finds the language of disclosure documents or adverts or the technical jargon that's used helpful. So,
well, just on that, I mean, I think some of the more enlightened employers are doing quite a lot actually on this front. It tends to be the bigger firms that's true. So there's a long tail for whom this is not yet in the bloodstream. I mean, coming back to Sue made used the expression duty of care a few minutes ago, which was a very good expression, conveying the sense of what financial services ought to be providing to their customers. It's as true of your employees as it is of your customers. You know, the more enlightened employers will think about their stakeholders broadly, which of course does include customers and clients and does include employees. And having something like this, call it education, call it advice, as part of the employment contract, as a vehicle to retention of the best staff, I think is an important ingredient. That doesn't always mean providing it. It may be no more than providing a conduit to it from a third party. But I think this will become ever more important for companies these days, you know, with a Generation Y set of employees. You know, this broader offering, but beyond the financial, I think will become more important. And I hope we'll see more firms moving in this direction.
I hope we do. I've written a couple of articles about this, and certainly some of the feedback I've had from employers have been along the lines of, we're so busy just trying to keep our head above water, and you're saying we've got to do this as well. That's the response certainly I've had.
But there are dividends for firms in terms of the mental health of employees and the motivation of employees. It's really important that firms, you know, understand that there's a huge benefit.
And recent research by the University of Warwick says that happy employees are 11% more productive than the average. Interesting how defined that is, I'm not sure. I shall send you a link to the research paper, but interesting finding.